In our next session, we're going to learn how to travel fearlessly. Culture shock can slow a vacation down and sometimes make it difficult to enjoy. One way to lessen culture shock is to learn about the culture ahead of time. Sophia Hyder from Papilia is going to share her expertise on researching cultures and feeling comfortable in new places, so we truly can travel fearlessly. Sophia Hyder is an international development professional, founder of Papilia, and culture etiquette expert. Her desire for creating global impact has taken her to over 30 countries, working with international and local clients on contracts upwards of $500 million. The concept for Papilia was born out of a passion for travel and curiosity to experience culture in a mindful and responsible way. As an avid traveler, she spent hours researching cultural nuances and etiquette to ensure she would feel confident and comfortable in any business or leisure setting. Sophia has combined her personal and professional experiences to develop customized cross-cultural communication trainings for clientele who want to build confidence, influence their audience, and set themselves apart from their competition.
Sophia, welcome to the summit. I am so excited to have you here. And really, I'm happy to learn all about Papilia and what it means to be a fearless traveler and how to become a fearless traveler.
Well, I'm excited to be here, Claire. Thank you so much for having me on this amazing summit. I'm really excited to learn and share everything travel related. So what does it mean to be a fearless traveler? Loaded question, but simple. It can be a simple answer. Fearless traveler. To me, a fearless traveler is wide open to new possibilities wherever they're traveling. So it can be in their hometown, it could be in a new country, it could even be in a familiar place as well. So it's a matter of being curious and asking questions and wanting to experience something new or something familiar that really fulfills their soul. And fearless, just as a caution, does not mean careless. So a traveler has to still be aware of their surroundings for safety reasons. So it's all about what fulfills your soul and what you enjoy and just learning about a different culture. No judgment.
Wonderful. I think many of us then have the propensity to become fearless travelers.
Yes, it's easy.
Excellent. So a little bit about your background. You've traveled to many destinations around the world, and you've started helping companies and individuals plan itineraries that work best for them, but also fit in the sustainable travel milieu.
Yes.
And I'd like to know, what is the earliest trip you remember taking, and what made it so memorable?
Oh, wow. So the earliest trip was when I was 10 years old. The one that is the most memorable. We moved to Sri Lanka when I was 10. And I lived in California. I'm from California. So huge difference.
Yeah.
Huge cultural shift. And there were so many things that were so memorable about that experience. I remember, it's my first overseas flight that's over 20 hours, and quite honestly, I don't know how my mom could dealt with me then. So I give her a lot of credit. But what I remember is getting off the plane and having the humidity just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I remember seeing a sea of palm trees. No people, no, skyscrapers or anything. And I still remember that like it was yesterday. But what also made this a real memorable experience was that I was exposed to a completely different culture, a new way of seeing how people live. And I was fascinated by all of it. When you're 10 years old, you absorb your surroundings like a sponge. And I also witnessed poverty for the first time. I was used to being in California and seeing all these $1 million homes on the beach. And the opposite was the case in Sri Lanka. So you see a lot of, tin huts along the beach. And it really just turns your whole perspective around. And I didn't know how to reconcile that because I was used to living a certain way, and I didn't know, what that meant. So that was actually the foundation for my international development work. That's what sparked my interest in it. And I've always been aware of how lucky I am, but also how other people live good, in good ways and in different ways, and it's more of an awareness. So I'll never forget that trip.
Yeah, wow, what a transformative experience.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, and I remember I didn't want to go and leave my friends, when you're 10 years old, and it's one of those trips that after it was all done, there's so much to process, and you just don't realize how much of an impact it is until maybe it's over, too.
How long did you stay in Sri Lanka?
2 years.
2 years, wow.
Yeah, and it was when there was a civil war that was still going on at the time. And there was actually, quite a few unfortunate, suicide bombings, and a lot of things were going on politically. Also, again, for the 10-year-old, how do you wrap your mind around something like that?
Yeah, you went from textbooks learning about, past civil wars or hearing about it on the news to having it probably be close to your backyard.
It was. It really was. Yeah, it's a huge eye-opener in so many different ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm sure your experiences there also maybe introduced you to sustainable travel and, traveling with a lesser environmental impact or a negative impact on communities, and how to travel lighter and have a positive effect. Yeah. So I guess when did you really start implementing sustainable travel methods into your travels?
So I think that 10 years old is, again, that really crazy, impactful moment that I have. And it started then because I remember I was having to boil water in our house, and I didn't understand why we couldn't just drink water out of a tap because I was used to doing that. And I didn't understand why the water was contaminated. So I really got to thinking about resources and the scarcity of resources, and how we as a society are responsible to use what we have wisely. And it affects local culture. It affects really everyone and everything without really realizing it. So by connecting, so I remember that, and then I've always thought about sustainability and resources since then. So I would even, as a 10-year-old, I would talk to, we'd go and we'd travel to, we've been to India, we went to the Swat Valley up near the Himalayas in Pakistan, and I would always talk to local people to understand what their cultures and their communities were like. So I'd ask them about light, where they get their light from, and generators, and how tourists, how they interact with tourists, and the use of water, and how far they have to go to get water. So I'd always been curious about sustainability and travel, and it's developed through my professional travel as well as personal travel. So I try to humanize a destination by talking to people, and by doing that, I'm able to better understand their environment, so I can get the perspective, but I can also respect the local environment.
Beautiful. I'd like to talk a little bit about culture shock. And I feel like no matter what we do, there's still going to be a little culture shock no matter where we go. I even get culture shock sometimes when I go to Canada, um, just because it feels so similar, but it has so many differences that just makes me feel like, whoa, where am I?
Right. Yeah.
What are some things that we can do to help limit culture shock, and are there some resources that we can utilize to kind of help prepare for trips like that?
Yeah, totally. So the question you just asked me is how the idea for Papilia originated. I was actually going to a friend of mine's wedding in Argentina, and I was looking for anything that could help me pack in a way that was efficient, culturally appropriate. I didn't want to be embarrassed whenever I, went to Argentina. I needed to make sure I was prepared for it. So it's that age-old question, right? What I did, so aside from Papilia, what I do is I talk to friends and family who have traveled to the place that I'm going to. I check the weather, so I'm not surprised by weather patterns, and I'm making sure I'm taking the right shoes or something warm if need be. But what I do is I research cultural norms. So one of the types of cultural norms is understanding whether a mindset is either more conservative or more liberal, because that will dictate your packing list. So that's one. With respect to other cultural norms, I spend time researching holidays. I know some people that have gone to Middle Eastern countries when Ramadan happens, so they're expecting to have a great vacation on their vacation time, not realizing that the whole country typically shuts down during Ramadan. As an example, I research eating habits and timing. So you don't want to you want to be hungry when there's a siesta that's happening, for example. Facial and hand gestures are a very important thing to make sure that you don't have strange culture shock. I remember in Sri Lanka, actually, and usually in India, where a no really means yes. So
like the head bob, right? Sometimes you don't always know.
So that right there, the yes no, can always be a very strange and confusing thing. So knowing sometimes that a no means yes is a way to make sure you prepare for that culture shock. Spatial distances are also something that, I think, as being at least in the Western culture, you like your space. Certain cultures don't think about that. And so it's just a matter of being acclimated to that or being aware. Basic phrases, how to bargain is another big one.
Yeah.
And quick story about that. I remember when I went to China for the first time, I bargained up as opposed to bargaining down. And it was for pearls. It was when I was, I don't know, I think I must have been 18 or something. And I bargained up, and both of us got so confused because she was like, wait a second, this is not how we do this.
Yeah.
And then I understood. I was like, oh. And then I did the half and the half and the half, and she's like, yes, that's correct. That's the right price. So it's just funny, right? So learn how to bargain. Transportation is another big one, just to make sure that you know that if you're going by bus, for example, road conditions. So certain buses may go really fast, and if you get car sick or if you don't want to be in that type of setting, know that you shouldn't be traveling by bus, for example. Exchange rates, health tips, safety tips. So I know I just threw out a lot of different things. But depending upon your own situation, transportation, for example, may be more important to you than an exchange rate. So you pick and choose which topics matter to you.
Okay. So if someone is interested in traveling to Thailand, and so what would be some good resources? I mean, obviously, we can check into Papilia and talk to you and try to get some really good information from experts who have already been there and who have done a lot of this research, like yourself. Are there other resources that you would suggest tapping into?
Yeah. So there are a few that I like to use. Travel plus social good is actually one of my favorite ones. And what I love about Travel plus social good is that they have hubs around the world. And if you want to go to Thailand, for example, and if there's a local hub there, you can ask them questions and ask them, be able to really connect with someone that is from there that knows a lot about the tourism industry, about local travel, maybe local tourists.
Great. Okay.
That's one of my favorites. I really like this new initiative by Sustainable Travel International. So they have their Travel Better Club, and they take you through a course that helps you think a little bit more about different cultural mindsets and cultural etiquette. And they also provide you with tips that you should just think about that you may not think about. And after you take that course, you have access to different discount codes and other partners that are a part of the Travel Better Club.
Excellent.
So, and it's great because it's not just travel; it's again about sustainable travel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So taking that extra step in limiting impact and making sure that the communities, the environment you're in, is benefiting from your time there.
Right. Right.
Excellent. Okay. So Travel plus Social Good, the Better Travel Club with STI. Any others you like to use?
I'm learning a lot more. So I'm not as familiar with this, and I'm learning more about it now. Volunteer travel is another big one, and you may know more about these organizations than I do at this point. But I'm doing more research, and as I do my research, I'm happy to share it with the community about not just the volunteer part to make yourself feel better type of travel, but also the type of volunteer travel that takes one more step to learn about the sustainability elements within the local culture. So I'm actually personally trying to now do more research on that avenue of sustainable travel.
Excellent. And yesterday, Thursday of the summit, we delved into that topic a little bit. Ethan Gelber put a nice book together from volunteer travel experts from around the world. It's called Adventures Less Ordinary, and it is available on our schedule. And so if any viewers missed yesterday and are also interested in learning more about volunteer travel and then the best ways to do that responsibly and sustainably, we have a lot of great content. We had an amazing panel, and we also talked to Orit Strauss from Giving Way. She started this amazing platform that connects with NGOs around the world who can then talk to volunteers personally. So you can actually email that NGO and say, okay, I have these skills. Are you in need of these skills? I am really interested in traveling in your area and helping you out. And so that way you can communicate one-on-one instead of having a mediary doing all that communication for you and taking usually a sizable financial chunk.
Yeah.
And so that way also all your money, if you have to spend money, that goes directly to the NGO.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to check out that book. Before I forget, in terms of other resources, there are a lot of different Facebook travel pages, depending upon if you're traveling solo, if you're a female traveler, where it's an open forum to ask questions and to get a variety of different answers. But one thing with all the resources that we're talking about is it's always important to me to triangulate the information that you receive, because everyone has a different perspective. And it's always good to check different resources to make sure that you have a full understanding of the information that you've collected, to make sure that you're comfortable wherever you are going in the world.
Absolutely. That is always so important, and it goes to show with almost anything you do in life. If you really want to learn more about something, you want to start getting involved in something, then learn as much about it as you can, learn from different resources, and then come up with your own understanding. Yeah, that's great advice. Excellent. So could you share, we kind of talked about culture shock and culture etiquette and learning some etiquette before you travel. Could you share a few general rules that are good to follow no matter where you are? Some good things to start with?
I can do that. So the first is acknowledging that every culture is different. So your habits at home may not be acceptable to the destination that you're traveling to. And just be aware of that. So don't be stuck to, well, I do it this way. You're traveling somewhere else, so make sure you respect that culture the best you can. Depending upon where you are, if it's not a historical site, for example, ask for permission before taking pictures. In Burma, for example, they have this poster that tells you not to take pictures of a woman bathing in the river, or just personal things that are personal to people, even though tourists may not have seen it before. Right. Women should, when in doubt, always bring a shawl. So you never know when you may just need to cover your shoulders if you're going to a temple, or if you're cold somewhere. It shows respect and that you've taken one extra step, even if you may be wearing, a skirt. Learn basic forms of communication. So how to greet or say thank you, or, where's the bathroom, or my apologies. Those are important things you need to know.
A phrase I've always learned is, I'm sorry, I don't speak whatever language is being spoken.
I don't understand.
I don't understand. No comprendo.
Where is the bathroom? I was thinking, donde está el baño? For some reason, always.
Right, always.
Question. The other, a big thing that's come up now, when you're showing respect for local cultures is also another phrase is, if you have any allergy concerns, making sure that you know how to communicate that into the local language.
Okay.
And, I had mentioned this before, but learning facial expressions and hand gestures are important, just to make sure, you don't, maybe be neutral in the way you're communicating if you're local, because either eye contact or, just certain facial expressions may turn another culture off and you may not know it.
Right, absolutely. That reminds me of, I spent some time in Thailand a while back, and, especially with children, in America, if a child runs by and, they give you a hug, sometimes you like to put your hand on their head, or you pat them on the head and say, hey, good job. And, that's a huge sign of disrespect. And so you don't touch anyone on the head, not children, no one. And, you kind of be careful of where you point your feet sometimes, because some cultures, if you point your feet directly at them, that can be very disrespectful. And so, it was actually kind of fun for me, is like, oh yeah, don't do that. That's disrespectful. Put your feet a different way, and just remembering those things and knowing that, most everywhere I went, I was, a way of saying hello, sometimes could be using the way. Yeah. And of course, I don't know how to use it. You bow at certain.
Yeah, I was going to say the bow. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, with the bow, you bow at certain levels depending on who you're greeting. And of course, I knew nothing about that. I was just, waving to everybody, and they appreciated that I was trying, even though I might have been botching it. But it's just trying and doing the best you can to assimilate to some of that culture while you're there. And it was very much appreciated.
Yeah, it's just showing respect and that you're trying. That's really what it's about, and your body language will show that.
Yes, absolutely.
And one more thing about food is that you may not like all the food you try. You may not be used to a certain spice intake or a certain flavor, but be discreet about how you feel, because food is a strong part of culture, and it can be offensive if you outwardly don't like it. And it's another form of respect.
Wow, that's really important, and we're going to get into food on Sunday, and kind of talking about how to find authentic food. And a lot of times, like you said, when you find authentic food, you might find some flavors that might not taste good to you.
Right.
But yeah, thank you very much for for reminding us. It's, if you don't like it, try to be discreet.
Just like maybe discreet batting of the eye, looking down a little bit. Nothing that's out really like, oh no, this is not going to be good for my stomach later.
This is gross.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
No problem. When you're done that's why I say
it. So, you've been all over the world. Have there been some cultures that it was maybe more difficult to try to do these things, to try to assimilate, or you also mentioned bargaining at one point. That can be quite a shock or difficult for some.
Right. Oh yeah. So when there was a time period when I was vegetarian, and I would go to I remember I was in Pakistan for work, and I would either go to someone's house and they had this amazing kebab, and I couldn't eat it, so I'd have to respectfully say, this is not really in my diet today. It smells really good. Maybe I'll just have the bread and the vegetables, because Pakistan is they have a lot of really good kebabs and a lot of good meat. So so that was really difficult for me in a place where a diet is mainly meat heavy. It's not as vegetable heavy. So it's just awareness and being prepared. So if you have certain restrictions like that, know that, be aware of it, and know that certain places may not accommodate to that. So what are you going to do? Are you going to bring your own snacks to sustain yourself till you find a place that has food that you're going to trust? So it's appreciating the culture. You're there because you're curious, but then also doing your due diligence to prepare ahead of time. Bargaining, you brought bargaining up. It's one of my favorite things. But it's also a very it's a very cultural practice, and it's different in so many different places. I bring up China again because if you are not interested in something, never make eye contact with a vendor, because you somehow will get you will somehow be going back to that vendor and somehow will be buying something. And it's all because you made like that glance and eye contact and they picked up on it. So if you're going to look at their things, I would suggest kind of like looking down as you walk and not making that eye contact.
Okay.
And other places, it's a matter of, like in Mexico, for example, is kind of they're so, and it's similar in different cultures. It's really similar all over, right? Bargaining is because it's a negotiation tactic, but how you do it is really the key. In Mexico, it's a matter of looking really not interested, and then scoping out what really grabs your attention, coming back. But you always want to have a price in your mind, and you know that they're going to come down to it, but always kind of quarter it so you know that you're going to come back to your price. In Mexico, at least half it. Quarter it and know you're going to come up to the half, so you're not going to be disappointed.
Okay, good.
If that made any sense. I can write a blog about this and do the math for you if you need some examples.
Well, and it's funny because bargaining is such a huge part, and so some places when you go, bargaining is expected, and if you don't do it, it can almost be considered rude.
Right.
Even though, and from an American, perspective, it's like, I'm giving you more money. Why is this a rude thing? But it is part of that culture, and so learning how to do that can be very important. But then I've also been to some parts where bargaining is only accepted with locals, and so if you come in as a traveler and you're trying to bargain, then that can be considered rude as well.
Right.
And so a lot of times, I try to go in and listen, see if others are bargaining, and then maybe try and maybe not be as harsh. Be like,
right.
Oh, well, maybe if it was this price. But yeah, my experience with bargaining is minimal compared to many other travelers, such as yourself, who've been doing it and seen it around the world.
Well, it honestly, it goes again back to facial expressions. It goes back to body language, and it's you pinpointed. It's reading that body language to see what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and also the other is working in local currency. You may be doing an exchange rate in dollars and saying, okay, that's not so bad, but you have to think in local currency.
Absolutely, and that can be difficult at first if you're not as familiar with what things actually cost,
right.
Especially since travelers often get a different price, even at restaurants. You're going to pay more than a local will.
Right.
And so, interesting. Thank you very much for for shedding some light on that tricky topic.
The 101 on bargaining, yep.
Yes. Excellent. So I'm curious to hear where you're headed next, and have you learned any cultural etiquette tidbits or any information about this new place?
So that's a loaded question because I never know where I'm headed next.
Okay.
I just got back from Antigua. I was actually on my honeymoon.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks. And so I can talk about that just in terms of cultural awareness, and then talk about the next potential destination, the big trip in November. There will be probably many more in between. But in Antigua, I began asking friends like that had been there, what they had done and what they went there for, and to understand what their perspective is on Antigua. And then I did a little bit of my own research. And then, honestly, I really left it up to being kind of the tips that I was talking to before, just making sure I was respectful, but also reading body language. And reading how they would treat tourists, being aware of my surroundings, and making sure that the experience that I wanted is what I was going to have. So I went in understanding the basics of the culture, but being open, and then really paying attention to people's gestures. So that was Antigua. The next big trip I'm hoping to take is in November, the end of this. There'll be probably many more, knowing me, but is another Asia trip. I want to go back to Sri Lanka because I haven't been there since I was 10. So it's changed quite a bit. And even with going back to a place that is so fond in my memories, it's changed a lot, right? So I have to learn about the culture shifts again. I have to learn about the history. So what I've been doing, excuse me, is trying to find authors who are from the country and read their stories.
Oh, cool. Okay.
As a different way to read about a perspective. And that's been pretty fun so far because I've learned just a lot about how things have changed since the Civil War has ended. I have also been I was also thinking about in that trip, going to Cambodia and Vietnam and I have not been to those East Asian countries yet. So I've, again, been talking to friends about that. I've been actually trying to go to local restaurants. It's easy, like that are Cambodian or Vietnamese in the area, so I can actually not only learn. I mean, I love Vietnamese food, but talk to the owners, because that's the local source of finding more information and maybe learning about some of their relatives that may still be there, who I could meet up with.
Okay. That's a really
so
good
yeah. And so I've been really trying to think about creative ways to establish links with locals, and that's what I've started to do now. And I'll probably have more conversations and maybe open up a forum to hear more about what people who have been to Cambodia and Vietnam and even Sri Lanka, what they have to say. Maybe have a Q&A or something like that, something creative that helps me understand a perspective, and to ask more questions and to be aware and be curious when I go travel there.
Lovely. If you're interested, Authentic Food Quest, who is sponsoring our day on Sunday, they just got back from a huge trip all through Southeast Asia. And they spent a month in Vietnam, a month in Cambodia, Thailand. They went through the Philippines. And so they have a ton of stuff that they just found, doing, just walking through the streets and finding some amazing restaurants. But they also met with a bunch of really great contacts and wonderful people over there. And so,
awesome.
They'd be a wonderful resource as well.
Oh, okay. Definitely take me up on that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing tips on how to be a fearless traveler. And I'm definitely going to take you up on a lot of those on my next trip. And is there anything else you'd like to share with viewers?
Yeah, definitely. So I love answering questions about travel etiquette and kind of like those Dear Abby columns that you used to read, if people are familiar with them. So you ask a question and you're not sure about it, and Dear Abby would respond back. I'm happy to, if anyone ever has a question for me that they may not be so sure about, I'm happy to answer that question. I usually find my information, again, it doesn't just come from me and my research, it comes from more authentic sources that are locals, if I can find it. Or actually, I always try and find, the 6 degrees of separation deal. So I'm always happy to answer questions, just a matter of contacting me at sophia@papilia.co.
Okay, excellent. And people could also reach you through Facebook and Twitter as well?
Definitely.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Claire. This has been amazing.